Hello and welcome to another episode of Growing Up B2B. I'm your host, Ed Delia. I'm the second generation president of Delia Associates, the place where B2B family businesses go to grow. And today I'm joined by Lisa Chowansky, president of HC Constructors, Inc. Lisa leads a company that has built a strong reputation in one of the most relationship-driven industries there is, construction. For more than 40 years, HC Constructors has specialized in heavy civil construction, site work, utilities, concrete, and infrastructure projects across New Jersey and the surrounding region. What makes this story especially interesting is that Lisa leads the company alongside her husband, Harry Chowansky, who serves as vice president. Together, they've built a business rooted in trust, integrity, and a solutions-based approach in an industry where relationships and execution go hand in hand. Lisa, welcome to Growing Up B2B.
Thank you. Thanks, Ed. Thanks for having me. Glad to be
Awesome.
here.
Glad to have you here. So let's start with the roots of HC Constructors. How did the business first come together, and what was the original vision behind it back some 40 years ago?
So originally, this vision was my father-in-law's vision. He had worked for a very large construction company his entire life, raised a family on that job. And he was an operating engineer, which is the union that handles the equipment operation.
Mhm.
He was also a very excellent mechanic, and he worked for many years. Like I said, raised a family of five, sent them all to college on that career, and this was his vision to start a construction company
Mhm.
with his family. So originally, the company was in my mother-in-law's name as owner, along with my husband and my husband's brother. So the original intent was to really be this family business, kind of continue this, legacy of construction.
Yeah.
And that was his vision. That's how it started,
Okay.
very beginning.
Quick question.
Mhm.
Where was Harry in the pecking order? Was he oldest, youngest, in the middle?
He is the baby.
He's the baby.
He's
Okay.
the baby of
Okay.
five. Yeah. So
Okay.
he's the youngest.
Okay.
Um, and if you read anything about birth order, it kind of fits where he took this company and what he decided to do with it as far as risk taking and, kind of that attitude of rebellion and breaking out of what is expected and doing what he thinks, is the right thing. So,
Well, you better send me some of that literature because I'm the youngest by 10 years.
oh,
So
okay. All
a
right.
lot, a lot of what you're saying might be resonating or maybe not.
Yeah. Yeah.
So ultimately, so he and his brother came in with your father-in-law, and that's really what got it rolling.
That's what got it rolling. And with my mother-in-law having the ownership. Um, and I'm not necessarily, I wouldn't say it got it rolling. It was structured that way.
Okay.
But really what got it rolling was my husband's decision to take it and to try and build something with it. So
Okay.
my father-in-law had one piece of equipment. All of them were trained equipment operators. They were all in the trades. So
Hmm.
my father-in-law, my brother-in-law, and my husband were all trained equipment operators. Um, and he really decided, my husband Harry, that he was going to actually do something with this, um, recognizing that in order to build a company, you have to have sales, you have to have customers. You can't just be able to run the equipment, right? And eventually, his brother dropped off. His brother was a very skilled crane operator,
Hmm.
and he was working through the union for other contractors. And for him, he had a young family at the time, and I think the risk of stepping out of a steady job and
Hmm.
into a business was not something he was willing to do at the time. I mean, Harry was only like 23. So he was just like, yeah, we can do this, just kind of throwing himself into it. Um, we got married at 23, actually, and had our first child at 25. And at the time, I was working for Johnson and Johnson, and we talked about this previously. Like I was building a career
Yeah.
outside of this business,
Hmm.
completely on my own, working for J&J. And from my age of 23, when we got married, for 10 years, I worked for Johnson and Johnson. I was getting promoted there. I was started as an account manager, was promoted to an account executive. Um, Great job, great company, lots of travel. And as we started raising our young children, that became um, less attractive to me as
Yeah.
far as, needing some more flexibility and looking for something potentially different, a different chapter for me.
And for our younger viewers, there was a time pre-Zoom and Teams where you actually had to go and travel and sit in front of the people you wanted to talk with, and that was how you did it, you know? So,
Yes, and
yeah.
that was the case. So in that case, I was responsible for all the J&J operating companies, domestic J&J operating companies. So there was travel to California,
Mm,
Florida,
yeah.
Texas, the entire country. Sometimes one day, because we didn't have Zoom. So I would leave on a 6 a.m. flight, go to Cincinnati. We had a J&J facility there, meet all day, fly home, and that was the day.
Yeah.
So Zoom would have been great.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm getting exhausted just hearing about what you did in a day.
Yeah, yeah, with kids. So
With kids, yeah. So you come
yeah,
home and then the kids are running around and
yeah,
you've got Harry trying to get this business off the ground while you're
right.
doing. Okay, so at what point did it make sense for you, Lisa, to enter the picture into HCC?
So, kind of a dramatic um, point for me. At the time that I was working for J&J and Harry was trying to get this business going, I lost my dad.
Mm,
Quite honestly, he was here one day, gone the next on a Saturday. And what that did for me, or did to me, was completely change my support system.
mhm,
So my family had a plan, and their plan was my mom had retired. She was a director of special services in Scotch Plains Vanwood school system.
mhm,
She had retired at her 30-year point,
mhm.
which is a public employee thing,
Yeah.
and she was going to take care of my children. By this time, 1997, I had a 1-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a 6-year-old. So I had 3 young children, but
Mhm.
still traveling with that same schedule we just talked about, and it was a lot. But I had my mom,
Yeah.
and she was taking care of those kids, and she was providing that stability in a very busy, hectic world for me.
Mhm,
When my dad passed away suddenly, all things changed. My mom was only
mm,
57 years old. She
mm.
really wanted to go back to work at that point.
Really?
It changed everything.
Mm,
And I mean, if I can say there was a good point to that, it really changed my perspective and made me say, okay, I can't continue doing this. I need to switch into
mhm,
this business, and I need to throw myself into this now, um, into this business. And that was not an easy decision. It wasn't driven by, it was kind of driven by necessity in a way. But at the same time, I had learned, I mean, as a company, J&J spends so much time training their employees. We
mhm,
trained on say I went on many sales calls. I did contract management negotiation. I learned how to present. Um, J&J was very big on training. And I carried that with me to this organization. We always offer 40 hours of um, development to our employees because we know how critical training is to building
mhm,
this business. So carried that over. Um, but then in 1997, left J&J, went into business with my husband, bought out my mother-in-law,
mhm,
who at that point in time, um, she was getting older. She wasn't really interested in the risk of the business.
mhm.
And it's an interesting thing, when you think about, a lot of people say, well, I'm going to go into business, just because you like to cook doesn't mean you should open a restaurant. You know, just because you can run equipment doesn't mean you should start a construction company, because that is one sliver. of your world, and typically you're going to find someone else to do that sliver for you, right? You own a restaurant, you're going to find a great chef.
Yeah.
You run a construction company, you're going to find good operators. That's not going to be your whole world. And because you like something, you really have to be prepared to go into business. And I think my experience with J&J and everything I had learned about selling a service and his content knowledge about construction made us a great team to move it forward, and our willingness to take on the risk, to put our house on the line, to do all those things
Yeah.
that most people just aren't interested in doing. So
And at a time, and just to give it a little more context to the gravity of the decision you made, pharma was the hot field
yeah,
around the time you were immersed in it. So I can only imagine what some of your colleagues were saying. You're going to do what? You're going to
yeah,
leave this and go into the construction industry? I'm sure that you had a few conversations where people maybe scratched their heads a little and said, "Really?"
yeah. And it was a culture shock for me because I went from J&J, where we lived by the credo. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the J&J credo, but it's very specific about what our priorities are, how we'll be. It defines the culture of J&J,
Yeah.
how we
Yeah.
treat each other, how we talk to each other. I leave that. I step into working with labor unions who are dropping the F-bomb at every other sentence on the phone with me because they're not happy with me. It was a culture
Yeah.
shock. And,
Yeah.
you had to really, a couple of things I had going against me. One, I was female. There's only 10% of construction, all of construction, including admin and, not
Mhm.
just the engineers in construction. 10% of construction is female. That's it.
Is that by today's standards or by the
Today's
standards?
standards.
Oh my goodness.
So when I
Wow.
stepped
So
in, I don't know what it
like
was, but
0.01%.
maybe,
Maybe
maybe
you were
not
the
making
only
any
one, Lisa. I don't know.
There were a
There's everyone
few,
in
but there
mutual.
weren't many. And we band together, trust me. Um, but and they're really, and when I think about that, stepping into that, it really did lead me to a lot of the decisions I made, right? So right now I've been heavily involved in Professional Women in Construction, which is really a networking group for the women in construction to learn from each other and to feel supported within this industry. And we have lots of men that are involved that are advocates for women in construction, but it's not an exclusive organization, but it is an organization that tries to promote, advocate, and connect women in the industry so that they can grow their business or their careers. So
Yeah,
I've been very involved in that once
that's
once my
wonderful.
kids were old enough to let me out of the house. Yeah.
Because you didn't have enough to do. So
Yeah, you just add on, add on.
that's wonderful because given that population tilt, I think sometimes there's a tendency for the herd to see the lone woman as a woman and not as a person and not as all that individual brings to the organization, to the table. When they're in mass or many, then it's like, okay, these are fully functioning people on our team that are doing great things every day. And I think sometimes it's more of a cultural thing, or than the way it should be. So it's great that you're advocating for that, and great that you're creating that support structure, because ultimately, yeah, there should be more, and there could be more, and hopefully through those efforts there will be more endeavoring into the construction industry. So that's
Yeah,
wonderful.
yeah.
Awesome. So getting back to you're leading the company as president, Harry is vice president. Talk a little bit about how did you settle into those roles? How did you divide and conquer? How did you decide that's the way it would be structured as you came into the business, or was that an evolution? Talk about that for a moment.
Yeah, I think it was, I don't know if it was, unfortunately, I don't know if it was an active decision at that point in time or if it was just how the company had originally been structured. Anna Chowansky, who was my mother-in-law, was the president. So it just made sense that I then stepped in and became
Okay.
corporate,
Yes.
the corporate
Yes.
president, right? As far as the
Mhm.
corporate structure. And so for a small business or a family-owned business, you know, maybe what's on paper isn't always reality, right?
Mhm.
So when it came to um, when it came to contract negotiation, when it came to finance, when it came to all of those things that I had really learned from Johnson and Johnson, that aligned more with the president of the organization. Where my husband was very strong and continues to be strong is in operations. So he became VP of operations, and
Hmm.
I took on the role of president, and just, in the end, we're all holding down the fort, right?
Hmm.
So you can call me whatever you want, but I've got a lot of responsibilities, and they kind of overreach um, the entire organization, including operations, because it
Hmm.
feeds into everything else, right? The contract negotiation, the finance, all of that. Um, and he's really focused. We kind of did this focus of he's focused on what's happening outside in the field and making sure that executes. I'm focused on what's happening in the office and what we need to
Hmm.
do to move forward as a business. So when I started, by the way, um, currently, our company is about 20 million in sales. When I started, when I left J&J, our sales were 400,000. So I get a lot of challenge because we're a women-owned business on whether I really had an impact, whether I really was the technical person that could lead this business, because he's got that. He's an
Hmm.
operator, right? Um, and I always say, you know, I always use that growth to show. And I can't take total credit for it because there's a team behind that growth, but it was under my leadership that we built. So,
Yeah.
I'm always and I think it's interesting what you just said about women in construction and when there's a single person, um, because there's kind of been a bias when you're trying to apply as a women-owned business that you can't really be running a construction company, so you've got to
Mhm.
always fight. And I'm doing that right now with New York. I've been in business 40 years and they're still
Yeah.
questioning my control and
Hmm.
management. And,
Hmm.
I think it's a bias that, women aren't really running construction companies. So it can be, yeah, it can set you back, but you fight through it.
And I mean, just to think about that compounding growth from really a fledgling company to, to now a major force in the industry, is remarkable. I did want to talk about something because a lot of times our listeners um, are contemplating partnership, and sometimes they are in a spousal relationship. So, can you take me back to I know you stepped in and it was the circumstances seem to align and say, hey, we could use your help and you can help here and the family and a lot of career dynamics going on. However, talk about what did that conversation look like with you and Harry when you guys talked about that? Like, how did that go? And was it like a given, or did you actually break it down and have the talk, if you will, about, hey, I'm thinking of doing this, or he's saying, hey, I'd like you to do this. Like, how did that go?
Yeah, that went for a while,
Okay.
and I think as that went on for a while. And
Okay.
I think it was always an informal conversation, like, I think we could really make a go of this. I think, um, you know,
Were
if
you both driving that discussion, or was it more Harry saying, hey, I could use your help, or was it more you saying, hey, I think I could make an impact, or was it really sort of a mutual awareness that was growing about this might be a good idea?
I think it was more of a mutual awareness as
Okay.
things were evolving in our personal life, and things were evolving for him in his trying to build this company. Is like, because he was so on the outside trying to execute the work, there was nobody kind of driving the inside to make sure that work continued, right? So it would
Mhm.
be this kind of, the company was kind of like this as far as work. The very difficult thing was that I had a uh, a salary that was stable, and I had benefits that were fantastic.
Mhm.
So to walk away from that, that took a lot of conversation. And, even for me as an individual, I never grew up saying I want to go into construction. So I had to kind of let go of, you know, where I thought I would end up and
Mm.
switch gears into an industry that I really didn't know a lot about. But it turns out that, business is business, right? There's, you've got to have a certain amount of revenue. You've got to be tracking that revenue. You've got to look at cost. You've got to look at all the things that we did at J&J applied here. So it kind of speaks back to just because you can cook doesn't mean you want to run a restaurant, because that's not what you're going to be doing. Right. So
But you had a very formidable recipe book, to use the analogy, from your J&J experience that it sounds like you were able to effectively translate and transfer into the new role at HCC.
definitely, definitely. Um, but with a lot of, with a lot of, people who were saying you can't, you can't,
Mm.
right? Just like you said, people were probably like, what are you, crazy? And they were, and that's what people did say. And, sometimes you just have to bet on yourself. Like you're saying, I had this recipe book. We kind of bet on each other, right? So we just
Mhm.
said, all right, let's do it. This is going to give me flexibility with the kids. I'm going to bring everything I have. You're going to bring everything you have, and we're going to do this. I think, quite honestly, it was more on Harry's side, like, hey, I could really use your help. And on my side, it was like, this is now becoming, without my support system, this is now becoming very difficult for me to do. Um, and then, the financial side, we just had to literally take a gamble on. You know what I mean?
Mm.
We really had to, just both of us commit to it. And
Mhm.
that's what we did.
Yeah.
We really committed to making this business what supported our family, and it has done that for many years now. And, and it's not easy. I mean, it's not everyone has the stomach to be in their own business. It's,
Yeah.
you know, it,
Oh, yeah.
anyone who's in a family business it's tough. So we kind of looked at, like, what are your strengths? And what I would recommend is people who are considering partnership and
Mhm.
family and all of that is really looking at, like, what are the strengths that every partner is going to bring to the table? And we have job descriptions for ourselves. Like, we wrote them back in 2003. So I have a
Really?
job description. He has a job. So we have job
Yeah.
descriptions. Um, and we don't always agree, but we, we respect our positions, especially at work. And, you know, sometimes on the outside, there's a decision he's making and he runs it by me, and I say, I don't think we should do that. And he's like, well, I'm going to do it anyhow. Okay. And then maybe on the finance side, there's something where I'm pretty strong about it. And he's like, but he'll that's my job. So we don't stay in our lanes necessarily, but we respect each other's lanes in the
Yeah.
fact that, this is really your strength. So I'm going to go with you on this. And this is your strength. So I'm going to go with you on that. And sometimes you have to compromise, and, sometimes you have to eat crows. Sometimes whatever.
Yeah.
Um, but it's all, part of growing the business and growing your relationship through the business, and trying to keep both of them intact can
Mm.
be a challenge.
So, I mean, clearly, walking into this or going into this, you and Harry already had a strong relationship. And, if I'm hearing you correctly, you put in a lot of mechanisms to make sure that it stayed strong in business. So,
Right.
job descriptions, defining your lanes, knowing that it's okay to challenge, but it's not okay to encroach. You can ask questions and you can have healthy debate, but ultimately, if it's in the field and it's something out there, probably Harry's going to make the call. If it's something that's a corporate decision, well, you're going to make the call. You're going to listen and you're going to hear them. But ultimately, there's going to be that foundational respect, which, probably shows up in all aspects of your relationship.
Hmm.
So that's, but I think it's an important message, Lisa, because I think a lot of people go in without some defined boundaries, without defined roles and responsibilities. And I think that's where it gets messy,
Right.
because then it's like, well, whose job is this? Who owns this? Well, we both do. Okay, well, that means nobody does, right? because
Right.
somebody's got to own it at the end of the day. So it sounds like you set that up early on, and it sounds like it served you well even to this day. Um,
Yes, absolutely.
and an impressive milestone too, 40th year, 40 years in business. In a industry, as you remarked, is not easy.
Yeah.
It is not easy.
Yeah.
So, and I'm sure you've known and seen a lot of firms in the industry who didn't make it, right?
Right.
Who were there when you started, but are gone today, or they've reformed, or they're part of something else. So, what do you think it is about HCC that's allowed you to endure to hit that 40-year milestone when so many others just haven't been able to make it that far?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. Um, I think although we've had significant growth, our growth has been controlled and conservative. So we both agreed that it wasn't our goal to be the biggest contractor in the state of New Jersey. And I think a lot of times, um, that is the goal for companies. They want to be the biggest. They take on jobs that are outside their expertise. They stretch themselves financially. So we've kind of, I think a couple of things have allowed us to do this. One is um, we have a continuous improvement atmosphere here. We are always looking to get better, reinvest in the company, figure out how technology can help us do things better.
Mm,
We are committed, the two of us, to this being successful. And, that we don't feel like there's a plan B on that. So we always kind of tie ourselves in like, this has to work. You know what I
mm,
mean? This has to work. So that commitment from leadership, and we've had other leaders that we've added too that kind of have that same attitude. Like sometimes we say they bleed HC, you know what I mean? And you'll have your employees who literally bleed HC.
hmm
My brother was the controller. He bled HC. He did whatever it took to make sure that financially we were where we needed to be. Um, but we're conservative in our approach. We had some very strong um, goal setting, planning. We're constantly looking at cost. We dig in to exactly where we are, and we're honest about that, and where we need to be. We do, goal setting on an annual basis and strategic planning and all of that possibly family businesses don't do, aren't that formalized, but
hmm
the more formalized and the more structure you can put in, um, and then not just do the work to put it in place, but actually revisit it often and follow it. It's just like any goal setting. You're going to be more successful if you write it down, revisit it, set expectations, all of that. So we do that, and we we're aligned, and we communicate that alignment so that our whole team knows, hey, we're a small business and we're not looking to be a large business. We're looking to be a small, flexible family business. Here's the advantage we give our clients is that our overhead is typically lower than very large, companies that have to feed that machine. So we can be more competitive in our pricing because we don't carry that huge overhead.
hmm
And that's intentional. Um, you know, I remember having a conversation with my mom about this, and she was like, well, don't you guys want to get bigger and bigger? And I said, yeah, but there's a sacrifice to that from my perspective. I still work an 8-hour day. I get to go home and spend time with my family. I have other interests. We have other things that we do besides this business isn't just completely, we have balance. And I guess that's part of the commitment too. And it
Yeah.
has been from the start when J&J started getting really, difficult. Like when I had my third child, they said to me, she was only 10 weeks old, and they were like, we really need you back. We really need you back. And I went back. She was only 10 weeks. And I was like, what am I doing? But balance has always been a priority for us personally and within our company. And we preach
Mm,
that with our estimators. We have friends with really big contracting companies because we're very involved in the industry
mhm.
who will tell us that their estimators are there like overnight working on the final details of a job. I'm like, we would never do that.
Yeah.
That's not our company. Like, we work an 8-hour day, and we expect everyone else to do that and go home and spend time with with your real family, you know?
Well, I would maybe just reframe what you said as not so much an aspiration to be a small company, but to be a great company. And
Yes,
greatness is not defined by size, but rather a company that does great work and a company that's great to work for. In that
definitely.
you
Oh,
do,
might
you
need to
know,
steal that as my logo, my tagline.
you know, and what I'm perceiving is just incredible discipline applied across the board. Discipline on, a lot of companies, you're right, will overextend and take on projects that they should not have.
Right.
CC will not. A lot of companies will bring on somebody who's very talented, but maybe is a cultural nightmare for the staff.
Yeah.
HCC will not. Other companies might have their estimators work through the night. You will not. So there's a real, which requires tremendous discipline because it's easy to chase the big opportunity. It's
Right.
easy to get allured by great talent who maybe isn't a great cultural fit. And it takes tremendous discipline. And I would hearken to say that there's probably some pages out of the old J&J playbook that probably gave you some of that foundation, and the rest I'm sure you built through your own experiences and evolutions as an executive with HCC. So compliments to you on that, because a lot of people get that one wrong.
Yeah. Thank you.
So
Appreciate that.
something that before this interview we spoke to was you started building and developing a younger team at HCC. When you're bringing on these future leaders, right? They're young, but they're eventually going to be the ones that are driving the company forward. What are you focused on? What are you looking for in that next generation of talent, Lisa?
Well, I think what stands out the most in our younger our entry level hires, let me frame it that way, is a couple of things that I see that are really critical for success, especially in this business, but in any business. Um, that they are solutions oriented, that they are really good problem solvers, and that they show leadership qualities, which might seem like, how are you a leader when you're entry level? But there are leadership qualities that come through. And, you know, we're looking for people who take initiative, who don't wait to be told what they're doing or what they need to do, but are willing to kind of step up. And to me, that taking initiative is a leadership quality. You don't sit back and wait for direction. You investigate things, you come up with your own solutions, you make recommendations. Those are the things that we look for, and we look for a very engaged um, employees. So it's very easy to come in and just kind of check the box, but we are not a check the box organization. We don't run on autopilot. So we need hires that are coming in, ready to roll their sleeves up and get involved and be a part of our team.
Hmm.
And when they do that, when they engage with our team and become a part of our team, I think it really serves them, and it makes work more enjoyable. You're
Mhm.
learning, you're pursuing, you're taking your own initiative, you're kind of testing your own skills and seeing what
Mhm.
you can do, because a lot of them are coming in young and dealing directly with our clients. We have a new estimator who went yesterday to a pre-bid meeting, a descope meeting, just to make sure that everything that was in the job that we had included in our bid. And Harry told me he did a great job. He was in front of some very experienced, a very big, I can't remember who it was. Driscoll, LF Driscoll, was the contractor, so a
Mhm.
big organization, and he did a great job. So I'm sure for him, we could have just left him back, but we want to expose him to that, and we want to see what his capabilities are, and we want him to be willing to stretch, grow,
Mhm. Mhm.
and he did a great job. And they were very impressed and asking him questions, and he was able to answer them. So those are some of the things we're looking for.
Excellent, excellent. So on your team, you've got some emerging young talent, and I'm sure you also have some what I'll call veteran talent. It's been there for a while.
Yeah.
So to what extent do you have to work to um, bring them together? Like is it something that you consciously have to work on to make sure that there's not a kind of a generational divide going on at HCC? And if so, if there is, what steps do you take as a leader to bridge those divides and make sure that there is really one team, one culture, one goal, ultimately to serve HCC and serve the clients at large?
Yeah, I think for construction, there seems to be a big gap. We've got a lot of younger people that we are seeing in the industry, and then we've got like 55 plus. So there's this weird absence of like 35 to 50 right now in our that I'm seeing in our industry.
Mhm.
So it does create a pretty good gap as far as what just competencies and tendencies even and what's important. So for the older group, our challenge is getting them to be on board with continuous improvement, right? So getting them to adopt technology, getting them to adopt a different way of doing things than, they always form the concrete wall this way. Well, how about we do it this way? How about we look at a different way? So what I'm seeing in the older group as a challenge is adoption of technology, open-mindedness, and willingness to try new things. But where they shine is in their work ethic, right?
Mhm.
They don't take vacation. They are there. They do not call out sick. That's not, their work ethic is so strong. And it's similar to mine, right? So I have to kind of watch myself because I'm like, what do you mean you're sick? What do you mean you're calling out sick, right? So, so for the younger generation, that's a different thing. It's hey, I'm sick. I can't do this today,
Yeah.
where our generation was kind of taught you persisted, you
Yeah.
took a couple of Advils and got yourself in there.
There's
Um,
plenty of time to be sick when you're retired, but till then, you
yeah,
gotta,
that's
you can do
right.
it when you're
You
retired or
grind it
you've
out. Yeah,
passed on. You can be sick all you want, but right now, you can't be.
it's not an option. So, which isn't a great mindset either. And then, for the younger generation and they're all about the technology. So what I see is like this frustration, is interesting when we rolled out iPads, utilization of iPads versus paper time out in the field. We handed one of our on-site supervisors an iPad. You would have thought it was like, you know, just some foreign object. He looked at it like, what am I going to do with this? And I'm like, well, it's similar to your phone. Like it took a lot of,
Mhm.
encouragement. We gave him 6 months to adopt to an iPad. You know what I mean? It was like that. What's happening on the other side is technology. They're looking at us like you're not keeping up. You know what I mean with us here, and so you know we're trying to utilize our younger generation to really just similar to what we did, Harry and I, when we looked at our strengths. We're like, okay, this is their strength. Let's let
Mhm.
them teach us. Let's let them show us what we're not using on this software program because we've been using it this way for the past
Mhm.
10 years and we don't want to step out of that box. So how can they help us you know learn more, and they move so quickly through it? What can we learn from them? How can we kind of let go of the control and let them say, hey, within reason, but here's how we could be using this. And we're asking them to be problem solvers and solutions, but when it comes to things like technology, we want them training us, right,
Yeah.
and teaching us how we could do it better. And they
Mm.
have they have a lot to contribute. I think the thing that you shouldn't do is kind of um, put the kibosh on that from, hey, this is how we've always done it, and we don't want to do anything new because this has been successful, and we've kind of scaled this and we're comfortable with it. And I think that kind of stunts the growth of your organization if you can be willing to listen to every generation and what they bring, you know, and they like time off. And we have a brand new person who came to us. He's been here maybe 2 or 3 years, and he he's looking to take 2 weeks off, and we're like, 2 weeks, like, you know. So we kind of have to get over that. That's okay, to take time
Yeah,
off is, if we really believe in balance, then we want to make sure that,
yeah.
everybody feels that too. So,
And there seems to be another, and it seems to kind of permeate from you, and maybe it is a core value, but this idea of being naturally curious,
yes,
and inviting people to not only to take take initiative and push them to aspire to opportunities or positions of leadership, but to be naturally curious. And but you also bring to that, and this is the balance, is the disciplines to control the risk that sometimes comes with being naturally curious and
right.
trying something new or trying something for the first time. And it just sounds like it's applied a little differently to your more veteran team members versus some of these emerging and young team members. You're basically saying, be naturally curious and just do it in different ways. And that's sounds like what kind of is one of those bridging bonds between the older and the younger parts of your organization.
Yeah.
So, which is a great aspect to have. So, as you look to the future for HCC, where do you see some of the greatest opportunity? What's exciting you right now, and as you look to the future, what's getting you excited?
What's really exciting me on a personal level is I'm having my first grandchild.
Oh,
So
congratulations!
that's a big personal thing. But I do have two of my daughters that are working in the business right now.
Okay.
So right now, what's exciting me is um, continuing to uh, focus on the structure of our business and the delivery of our business in a way that I don't have to be here 100% of the time.
Hmm.
So my husband and I right now are thinking about, and we have been probably for at least 5 years now. It's kind of similar to the conversation of going into business together. It's an ongoing conversation. It's a little bit informal right now, but
Hmm.
succession planning
Hmm.
is first and foremost on our mind and what that could look like. And with this younger team, I don't think they're quite ready yet, but
Hmm.
curious if they would be willing to step up into more leadership roles. And, as we have performance assessments and performance conversations, we're bringing this up like, hey, what's your next step for you? Would you be interested in director of operations?
Hmm.
What are these new roles, and would you be interested in filling it? And so that's exciting me. And I because I am curious and I do have a continuous improvement attitude, I always feel like there's something I'm working on, like not project wise,
Hmm.
not that granular, but more like oversight, like, oh, I think we could be doing this better. I think we could be doing safety, and how could we get safety really ingrained and saturated into every single person that works in the field? There's always, I've always got some initiative, probably drive my team crazy because I'm always looking for not the next best thing, but like, how can we use the information and the experience we've had to just
Hmm.
like refortify the company and
Hmm.
retool the company. And AI is one of those things.
Hmm.
I'm really open to it. I don't have a strong roadmap, but I know we have a seminar coming up on that. So I'm going to sit through that and maybe hear some more
Yes, we do.
facts. But definitely open to that. Just don't want to lose the human component of
Hmm.
what we do and how we do it, because it is a human business, construction. And I know people don't think of it that way, but it's communication. And construction is constantly changing. And like when you see a project and even a public project, oh, it was supposed to be a $1 million contract that lasted 2 years, and now it's a 10 million contract that's lasting 10 years. Construction is constantly changing. So without the human component and the communication and the collaboration, these big old buildings, would not get built.
Yeah. And the continuous learning that you afford your team as well, I think, is a great takeaway for our listeners. 40 hours a year to go and learn.
Yeah.
What's the next new thing? What's the next technique? What's coming in our industry, so that we're always a few steps ahead of our clients as opposed to ever falling behind.
Yes.
So that's a great competitive strength as well. Um, You as an individual, as a spokesperson for HCC, you've been very visible, you've been vocal, you've been involved in women in construction and taken steps out to play that role of brand ambassador as well for HCC. Um, to what extent do you see that and your persona, Lisa, as part of the visible long-term brand equity of the company? Do you see you in the company as one? Do you see yourself as a representative of? Like, how do you see yourself as it relates to the HC Constructors brand?
That's a good question. To think about that one for a little bit. I guess I am always out there advocating for our business, but there's other people out there doing the same within our organization. So maybe not as visible to you, but we have a lot of different organizations that we're a part of. Alliance
Okay.
for Action, UTCA, ACCNJ, and our employees get involved on committees there. And this is not required when you work for HC, but a lot of people from a um, professional development and industry development
Hmm.
perspective will step out and do, our VP of pre-construction is heavily involved in scholarship. So she does,
Mm.
she identifies candidates with some of the outside organizations. And so I think there's a lot of different faces to HC Constructors. I make it a point to get involved, and one of the things I like to say is I like to weave our company into the fabric of what is New Jersey. So we're predominantly a New Jersey company,
Hmm.
right? We do some work outside upstate New York, Maryland, Pennsylvania, etc. But we're a New Jersey company. So, I'm involved in the New Jersey Chamber of Commerce. I'm involved in a lot of different outside organizations, national utility contractors, etc. Um, because I think that's important. I think people need to know who you are.
Hmm.
That you need to be involved in your community at large, the state and local. And I think that makes you a better business person because you hear, like one of the things I'm involved in is the Leadership Council for the NFIB. Um, and we talk a lot about small, but the industries are like one person owns a bunch of salons, one has a printing company. It's all different,
Hmm.
but it's all the same.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
So it's all the same, pain points, all the same concerns. What are we doing on workforce development in the state? So I think it's important to give back. And I think I'm in a position now, personally and professionally, when I can. I do have
Hmm.
that kind of time and I can make that commitment. Um, so I think that's an important part of who I am is making sure that purpose for me on a personal and professional level continues. And I get that now by trying to give back and be a part of, the larger community, not just my business. Because that gets old.
Yeah.
Once you've got it up and running, it gets old. You're
Yeah.
doing the same thing and you need something a little more. And the interesting thing is when you add some dimension to your professional life, you bring that back to your company
Yeah.
and it
Yeah.
makes it more successful. You know what I mean? It's not just taking when you go out and volunteer or get involved, it's giving too, right? So it does
Mhm.
both.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's certainly that aspect of learning along the way, whereas, okay, they may very well be the owner of 4 or 5 salons, but they might say that one thing
Yeah.
that triggered an idea in your mind that now represented a positive bring back to HC and something that you could implement, and even in a seemingly unlikely place, right?
Yes.
But when you're naturally curious and you're open to learning and new ideas, wonderful things can happen for sure. So you started very much with a mission. You and Harry were on a mission, and you were all in, right? Um, if you look back as you've evolved as a leader, Lisa, is there a leadership belief or something that you maybe held to early on that you've now let go, or that your mindset on has shifted or changed with your growth as a leader and the growth of HCC?
Um, yeah, I think probably one of the things that I needed to let go of as a leader was this tendency to want to fight. And that comes from, I think, coming into a business that was, that was highly male,
Hmm.
that I was reminded constantly that this like wasn't my place type, thing.
Mm.
And so my initial reaction to that was like, don't tell me what to do. And I can do whatever just very aggressive. And I learned that that really wasn't serving me and wasn't helping me build this business because it was a bit of a distraction
Mm.
to get involved in like, oh, these people think I can't do it and let me prove them wrong, like constantly trying to
Yeah.
prove them wrong
Mm.
became consuming, took a lot of my energy and really wasn't helping. So to me, building your business and being successful is the don't tell me what to do because I don't need to always fight against public opinion. But I do need to build this, and I know I'm capable of doing it. So I had that confidence wherever that came from. I believed in myself always. And so, that's something leadership wise that I really had to let go. Um,
Mm.
you know what I mean? And it continues, as I mentioned, with New
Yeah.
York giving me a hard time. Like, are you really doing this? I'm like, yes, I am. But now I'm being smarter about it. Now I'm using data. Now I'm using, job descriptions. Now I'm using things to, you know, kind of put that in writing, instead of just, kind of having this added, kind of having an added.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it takes tremendous both emotional awareness and emotional fortitude to be able to, even to this day, seeing it show up again and again and again, to still
Right.
let it go and say, okay, that's not the mission. That's not what we're about. That's not what I'm about. Here's what I'm about. But I can feel the weight of that
Yeah.
just from your
It's
words.
exhausting.
And
Yeah.
yeah,
But
and
it's
it
more
can be.
exhausting to fight it than to figure
Yeah.
out how to
And,
um, utilize
yeah.
it in order to,
That's a tremendous
benefit you.
realization, I
Yeah.
think, for you, and a great another takeaway for our listeners, especially those that happen to be female in a male-dominated industry, where they're maybe feeling the strains of that fight, if you will, that
Yeah.
to let it go. I'm sure when you were young, setting off on this amazing career at J&J, I'm sure your dad was very proud.
Mhm.
So if your dad were with us today and he looked in and said, at the choices you made, at the journey you took, at the detour, what do you think he might say or feel about the decisions you made, Lisa?
Uh, so that's a tough one, but I will. You got me good on that one. Um,
And
I
I ask that because I can tell that the relationship with you and your dad was incredibly strong
yes,
by how you
very
spoke of
very
it.
strong,
Yeah.
very strong. So it's interesting because my dad was in insurance, so he was not a risk taker.
Okay.
And when I think about like risk taking, um, I wonder where that came from because both my parents were, first generation college graduates.
Hmm.
My dad went to Fairleigh Dickinson, my mom went to Montclair. Um, and they, both, my dad was in insurance, my mom was in the school system, she was a speech pathologist. So they took very conservative roles and they would not have gone into their own business. It wasn't they didn't have it in their DNA. I just know it from who they
Hmm.
were. So my dad was definitely not a risk taker. I always think about the fact that my parents enrolled me and I was a gymnast as a young child. And so when I think about my own risk taking behavior, I think a lot of it came from that because you couldn't be
Hmm.
successful in
No.
gymnastics if you weren't willing to throw yourself backwards on a 4-inch piece of wood. You know what I mean? You had to be a risk taker. So I think that's where, although that wasn't part of my upbringing, it was in the sense of like, that's what I did. And
Yeah.
I was very competitive. So I was training When I was like fifth grade up through high school, I was training 6 days a week. So that's where the
Wow.
work ethic came from, right? 6 days a week training, risk taking, all part of that, a big part of my experience growing up. The tissue coach got me upset. Um, but
Sorry.
um, I think he would be incredibly proud. And one of the things I did um, last year in his honor was I started a scholarship at the Olson College of Engineering at Fairleigh Dickinson University. So
Mhm.
it's my dad grew up in Kearney, New Jersey. And so the intent was an engineering student from Kearney. If we couldn't find one from Kearney, we expanded to the county that Kearney sits in. So I started that last year. And, I'm going to be the first scholarship was presented, going to be meeting the candidate this year. So I think he would be uh, in awe by what we did because it's not part of how he would have lived his life.
Mhm.
Um, and he might have been the one telling me, "Don't leave J&J, don't leave J&J," but he was no longer around to whisper that in my ear.
Mhm.
And I think he would have been um, worried for me when we made that decision, but I think
Mhm.
if he were to look back, he would be in awe. So,
Yeah. And I think if I'm reading your folks correctly, they never tried to make you who they were, but they let you be who you are. And you're still that little girl on the balance beam. It's just that you've got a new beam now
yeah,
and a new set of tools, and you're still doing gymnastics, just in a new
sure. That's
environment.
for
So,
sure. Yeah.
needless to say, I think he'd be very proud of what you've accomplished. Any parent would, for sure. Last question, less emotional one.
Good, good, good. I need to rein it back in. I need to find that discipline.
So, you've given a brilliant telling of your story, your journey, and what it's taking to lead and grow HC. If any of our listeners wanted to connect with you personally, Lisa, or learn more about the company and what you do there, what's the best way for them to do that?
I would say the best way to reach out to me is either through our website, which is www.hcconstructors.com. Actually, any message that comes in there goes to my daughter Corinne, and she promptly sends that to me. But you can also reach me through my email, which is long, and I don't know if we can put it in writing, but it's L, like my first name, and Chowansky, like my last name, and it's at hcconstructors.com. So that's my email address. If you want to reach out, I've got some people that I mentor and that I work with, young female professionals, and if I can find the time, I'm more than happy to have a conversation with people.
Wonderful. Well, today, listeners, we learned that construction is certainly built on more than just steel and concrete. It's built on trust, communication, and very strong leadership, one that has the discipline and the guardrails to drive an organization forward and is always naturally curious. Lisa, thank you for sharing both the HC story and the leadership dynamic that has helped shape its success. Again, we've been speaking with Lisa Chowansky, president of HC Constructors, and I'm your host, Ed Delia. And this has been another episode of Growing Up B2B. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time. Lisa, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks, Ed. It was fun.
Hey, thanks so much for tuning into Growing Up B2B. To explore more episodes and insights, visit podcast.delianet.com. And if you've enjoyed this episode, please give us a rating or review on your podcast platform of choice. Having worked with hundreds of family-led businesses across my career, and being a second-generation leader myself, I'm on a mission to help every family business I meet achieve next-level growth for their organization. So feel free also to connect with me on LinkedIn and let's support each other. You can also find out more about my company at delianet.com. Again, I'm your host, Ed Delia, and thanks so much for joining us today. Take care.